welcome back to another day in the arena. It's me, it's CGB, and today is going to be one of our spikier deck techs and deck guides. This weekend was Grand Prix Milwaukee with 1,300 players competing in a major tournament right here in the American Midwest. The entire event was won by Adrian Sullivan, who is a Pro Tour regular, and they won with, I don't have to say they, he won with Jeskai Control, but a different take on Jeskai Control than you might be used to, with Teferi, of course, in the mix, but much more focused on Niv-Mizzet, and it's kind of interesting to see a deck with 4 copies of the Mighty Dragon Wizard, and even 2 copies of Dive Down and a copy of Spell Pierce. The deck has a very simple game 1 plan. It's make Niv-Mizzet happen, protect Niv-Mizzet from the ravenous chupacabras of the world, and then draw a million cards and kill the opponent, as Niv advantage is oh so powerful. A little bit of feedback that I got from the last 2 sort of professional-ish, like Pro Tour commentary videos that I did, is that you like to know more about the players. Adrian Sullivan is definitely someone that you can know more about. He's mostly known for writing, which he's done a lot of good writing over the years. If you search for his name and Magic the Gathering, you'll probably come up with a lot of articles over many, many years. He's been a player of the game many times. In fact, he's played in 24 Pro Tours. Starting back in 1997 and 98. His first Pro Tour was in Chicago in 1998, or 1997, I'm sorry, part of the 97-98 season. He is in the top 200 in the world in all-time winnings. He has a top 4 in a Brussels Pro Tour, Dragons of Tarkir, back in the 2014-2015 season, and this is his highest. It's his first, according to this, a Grand Prix first place finish, and his highest finish in a pro level event. So, much deserved. I'm getting information, in case you wanted to know, from the MTG Gamepedia.com. So, yeah, I've read Adrian Sullivan's stuff over the years. He's also been at a lot of tournaments that I was back in my days as a competitor, a fellow Midwesterner from Madison, Wisconsin, which is separated by a large body of water, but basically next door to where I live in Michigan. And it's nice to see him do well. I also believe I know that he is a roller derby fan, at least based on the Mad Rollin' Dolls t-shirts that he wears. And since I also coach roller derby in my spare time, I feel we would probably get along great. But today, let's get back to the deck. So, weird card choices all up and down. Let's go right down the list. 2 copies of Dive Down, basically saying I want to play my Niv-Mizzet, I want to protect my Niv-Mizzet, and then the rest should take care of itself. 4 copies of Opt to put it together. Also, it lets you run 25 land instead of 26 or 27, which Niv would often require. A copy of Spell Pierce, sort of like a 3rd Dive Down almost, but a little more flexible and can hit some different targets. There's a Shock, just 1 Shock, just sometimes you gotta get that cheap card. 2 copies of Syncopate, which can probably comfortably move over the 2-drop spot or somewhere else to get some counters in. You'll notice this isn't a counter-heavy Jeskai deck, not that many, but 2 copies of Syncopate made the cut. 2 copies of Lava Coil. Exile those things, even at sorcery speed. We're totally fine with it. Those crackling drakes are everywhere, my friends. Then we have 4, not 2, not 3, 4 copies of Treasure Map. And this is where you might be saying, look, there's no search for Iskanta. CGB, what's going on? There's no Chemister's Insight. This is where you have to look at, this isn't just a Jeskai control list, it is a Niv-Mizzet control list. So your cards have to play into that. A treasure map, flipping a few turns after coming down, producing 3 treasures, lets you do things like play Niv-Mizzet and still have some treasures available to use Dive Down, or cast other spells. And that's why 4 crazy copies of Treasure Map making the cut here. We also have 3 copies of Expansion Explosion, which can be the late game super firepower you need, or the short term counter spell, or copy of Deafening Clarion shenanigans you may want. 2 copies of Enigma Drake. No Crackling Drakes in the deck either. Adrian Sullivan very firm in an interview that Crackling Drake doesn't belong in the deck, and that he needed something cheaper, something that came down that he could protect. On turn 4, you could have a Crackling Drake, which would draw you an extra card, but you could also have an Enigma Drake backed up by a dive down so it actually lived. And more often, Adrian wanted his card to live, not just draw a card then die, as you are often under some amount of pressure. Then we have 2 Ionize, not too deep on the counterspells, like we said, 3 Deafening Clarions, which do feel a necessity in aggressive metas, a Rekindling Phoenix, a Settle the Wreckage, just get that sweet settle equity from a 1-of here. Same thing with Rekindling Phoenix also being a 4 mana. Instead of a Crackling Drake, it's a 4 mana card that often lives. The opponent can kill it, but then it comes right back. Then only 3 copies of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, giving the obvious nod to the 4 of Niv-Mizzet. We've got 5 islands, 4 fortress, 4 steam vents, 4 falls, 4 retreats, 4 foundries. So all the rare lands, but only island as the basic. Also, by the way, should have mentioned this earlier, if you don't want to hear me talk a lot about Adrian Sullivan or the deck or the sideboard guide or the budget versions of the deck, you can skip all of that by clicking on a little timestamp type link that I try to post at the top of the description. It should tell you where to skip to if all you want is that sweet gameplay. Then over here, let's get in the sideboard. We have 2 Sealaways, a Disdainful Stroke, a Negate, 2 Ixalan's Binding, a Settle the Wreckage, a Cleansing Nova, 2 Lyra Dawnbringer, a Spell Swindle, 2 Stars of Extinction, and 2 Banefires. So another splattering of cards over here in the sideboard, not your typical, as you often see, at least in Arena, the like 4 Negates and 4 of this and 4 of that, but just a lot of individual cards to complement the deck. Now, I watched Adrian play a few rounds of the GP. I did not tweet at Adrian for their sideboard, for Adrian's sideboard guide, and because of that, I may make some mistakes in laying out my sideboard guide, but I'm going to do it anyway. This is how I would use the deck to sideboard. As always, be flexible in your sideboard plans. Base it on the cards you see, not the cards you think you should see, or the cards you run yourself. So moving in, this is how I would sideboard against white aggro. You want basically a lot of your cheap removal and sweepers to keep them on their toes. So in comes the other Settle the Wreckage, and in come the Sealaways to accompany the Lava Coils in the cheap mana spot. Also, the Cleansing Nova, get that in there. 2 of the Niv-Mizzets turn into 2 Lyra Dawnbringers, and I keep the Spell Pierce and the Dive Downs because you still need to counter that Conclave Tribunal that would ruin your day and mess with your Lyra or your Niv-Mizzet. So that's why those stay in the deck, even though they might at first glance not look too good. Spell Pierce taking out a History of Benalia can also be a big deal, same with the Heroic Reinforcements. And all the treasure maps do stay in as that mana advantage is still needed. Cards I cut and why. I would cut the Ionize because trading 3 mana to counter a spell from the white aggro decks is usually a bad deal. They'll often see your 3 mana open and play around it with multiple 1-drops, meaning that you trade your 3 mana spell for a 1-drop and probably not even their best 1-drop because they'll layer it in such a way that you counter one but not the other. It just never works out all that well holding up mana against these decks. You really want to be deploying things to keep up with them. Ixalan's Binding, just a bit too expensive and a bit too easy for white to remove with their own Conclave Tribunals and such. It is possible you want 1 or 2 of these to specifically lock down Conclave Tribunal, but I opted to stick with the dive down plan instead of that. Next on the list, Spell Swindle, too expensive. Niv-Mizzets, we trim those because they're so expensive. Star of Extinction, too expensive, even though it is a mega sweeper. And Expansion Explosion, also too expensive, and the expansion side doesn't copy very many spells against white, so the explosion side is mostly what it would be doing, and that's gotta go. So this is the guide I would use against a white aggressive strategy. Next up is, of course, what we got here, red. Red, the other very, very aggressive strategy, with only a few differences from white. Against red, I do trim the treasure maps. I don't feel that there is the time to really activate them. I also trim the Ionize for a similar reason to the white deck, and 2 Teferis because I also find that they die far too easy and often just don't do enough, and I would rather be on the board earlier, and some Lyra Dawnbringers did take their place. Star of Extinction doesn't go in, of course. Niv-Mizzet, I actually cut 3 of them because against red, it just doesn't seem very practical to get your 6-drop online. But here's some different things that you want against red than white. I like having Negate. I like countering that lethal burn spell or countering the Experimental Frenzy that usually comes out. Also, you'll need it more to counter things like Fight with Fire after sideboarding games. Also, I like to sideboard and Seal Away. It's the cheapest removal, so you keep that coming. But another card that we usually take out against white, I like to get Ixalan's Binding in against red because you do have to deal with that Experimental Frenzy game. If you're playing against a white-red deck that also runs Frenzy, that's another reason that you may need Binding around. So, taking out Experimental Frenzy is still a pretty high priority, but also locking them out of their Chain Whirlers or their Viashino Pyromancers is still a pretty decent play. Not bad at all. Lyra, of course, is how you win the games, win the matchups. If you can get Lyra down and protect it with Dive Down, you're doing it. Also, I keep all the expansion explosions in here because it's much more likely that you can expansion copying a Wizard's Lightning or a Lightning Strike and killing their creature with it than it is against the white versions of the deck. So that's why Expansion Explosion stays in this matchup. Sliding over to Golgari. This is, in my opinion, one of the more fun ways to play the deck, as we're just trying to go way over the top of Golgari, meaning we're trying to do things that are far more powerful than the Golgari deck can do. What can Golgari do? Its game is primarily to offer all the Carnage Tyrants possible. Just keep putting more and more and more Carnage Tyrants onto the battlefield. So for me, I like to take out the Lava Coils. There aren't that many things you need to worry about hitting with Lava Coil in the matchup that sweepers can't pick up, and you're going to see that we still keep plenty of sweepers in the deck. I also take out the Shock and focus on my sweepers to keep all those annoying little explorer creatures clear. I take out the Spell Pierce because the games go long, there's often a lot of mana involved. While the Spell Pierce might be able to hit a Vivian Reed on turn 5 or something like that, more often than not it will be a dead card for a good amount of the game. Enigma Drake also comes out, Chupacabra bait, and something that gets hit far too easily by Vivian Reed, and I choose to keep with my stickier threats. I stick with the Rekindling Phoenix, and I keep all the Nivs to make the opponent deal with the Niv. And I keep the Dive Down specifically to protect Niv, but I don't think that Enigma Drake is that important. Ixalan's Binding and Seal Away I keep out of the deck because of Thrashing Brontodon, Vivian Reed, Vraska, Big Vraska, all the ways that there are to blow up enchantments in the Golgari deck. They don't have much trouble with that, so I don't find these very useful. The Banefires at the same time, I don't feel I need. Usually when I get to that stage of the game, a nice big Expansion Explosion will still do the job, but I trim it because I also have these big cards coming in. Star of Extinction. That is the really fun way to take on the green-black deck, and Spell Swindle to gain a whole bunch of treasures and then cast Niv, Protect It, or Star of Extinction is really nice. Cleansing Nova also comes in, along with the Settle the Wreckage. The Tyrants must die. Just remember that. Now, if your opponent is still doing really good with their Wildgrowth Walker Explore game, if that's more pressure than the deck can typically handle and the sweepers aren't doing good enough, so far I've drawn my sweepers, but perhaps I'm lucky enough to get away with it. If the sweepers aren't doing it, maybe it is okay to bring back in Lava Coil, and Ionize is the card I have my eye on the most, as the Golgari deck, because of all its cheap Explore creatures, is usually very good about playing around your open mana. And I like having Disdainful Stroke and Negate in the matchup for the Planeswalkers, but perhaps Ionize can go and instead be Lava Coil so that you don't lose to a Jade Light Ranger. Next, we'll talk about the Drake matchup. The Drakes is an interesting matchup, and primarily I think it's a favorable one because we exile the hell out of all their stuff. This is where you want to bring in the extra Settle, both Ixalan Bindings, both Sealaways, keep in the Lava Coils. We just exile the hell out of Arclight Phoenix, and we keep those Drakes on their toes as well. Niv-Mizzet is still the end game, but bringing in Lyra can also be a big pain as their primary removal is Lava Coil. They do have some amount of Beacon Bolt, but we can run them out of that or protect from it in general with Dive Down and Spell Pierce. So, yep, between Lyra and Niv-Mizzet, we got some things that are far too big for their Lava Coils and their Shocks. So we have nothing that's vulnerable to Shock or Lava Coil. They'll likely take those out, but I also like taking out Ionize because, again, they can play around it pretty well by casting so many spells a turn. If you're paying 3 mana to Ionize a Chart, of course, it's not really where you want to be. However, having a Syncopate, I still like the Syncopates in the deck. I still like Negate, and the Spell Pierce seems to do the job. So we're not without counter magic, but we still have the ultimate just spam you with Niv-Mizzet plan that usually goes well over the top of theirs. Now, after sideboarding, they often have their own Niv-Mizzets, but not this many of them. And we have the answers in Ixalan's Bindings, and Teferi is a temporary answer. So I like this matchup, and I like this sideboarding plan. For control versus control, we're also super favored in game 1. The treasure map dive down Niv-Mizzet plan is really annoying for a control deck to face. After sideboarding, we don't need to change a lot, but I do bring in Ixalan's Binding to combat opponent's Ixalan's Binding. I bring in Cleansing Nova to combat both boards that get out of hand with their own Niv-Mizzets, but also sometimes they bring in, and I'm not kidding, the Legion War Boss. If you haven't been following the pro meta closely, you might not expect Legion War Boss out of a Jeskai control deck, but they often bring them in against other control decks. Cleansing Nova can help mop that up, at least a little bit. The Banefires come in, and big old Banefire can also help either finish the game or get rid of their own Teferis, or even get rid of their War Bosses, if that's a necessary thing. All the expansion explosions are in the house, and I like keeping the Enigma Drake for some amount of pressure. However, if you are running into a lot of those war bosses, it can make sense to bring back some Clarions, just as a way to mop that up. Then down the line, though, I think that you are heavily favored for the most part because of Niv. I think I've said that a few times, but I'll stick to it. Otherwise, some cheap counter spells. I like having the Enigma Drake threat, but like I said, maybe it should be Clarions or another way to counter sideboard strategies from the opponent. Alright, the last thing we're going to take a look at before moving onward is the budget list, and building 3-color budget control decks is hard. Let's face it. It's a big ask to try to take a mana base that had 20 rare lands and make it functional. This mana base isn't necessarily functional. I wouldn't highly recommend being on this plan, but if you really want to get on Jeskai control, this is a good starting point. We shaved it back to 1 Teferi and 1 Niv-Mizzet, and instead built it mostly around the Drake plan with 3 Enigma Drakes and 4 Crackling Drakes, so that you always have a Drake to play and then protect with your Dive Down and Spell Pierce. And we also increase the counter spells a bit so that we can defend our Drakes with more of a counter game. Sinister Sabotage getting in there because Ionize is rare. You still want as many Deafening Clarions as you can get your hands on. I cut it back to 2 to try to be conscious that most rare wild cards are missing, but really you want more of these. And the Settle the Wreckage, I know you get one in the first few weeks in one of the starter decks, so I think most people have that available. When you can't use that many treasure maps or don't have access to that many treasure maps or expansion explosions, Chemist's Insight has to fill the void, so you can do 4 mana, jumpstart, and get ahead in cards that way. This deck is very, very different. The other one, you just need a lot of rare cards to do treasure map into Niv-Mizzet and build your plan around that. It's just the way it has to be. But if you wanted to shift to a Drake focus, you could go with a deck similar to this one. All right, now that we've covered all that, let's go out and play some games and have some fun with Adrian Sullivan's Jeskai Control. Would you look at that? Welcome. We have won some kind of a coin toss. Would we like to play first or draw first? I would like to play first. So this hand doesn't have blue mana, but it does have 2 Deafening Clarions to sweep up whatever our opponent's up to. Still, the hand does mostly nothing, and I have to mulligan this one. Now we have blue mana, but no white mana. But we have no white cards to play. And again, this hand is pretty bad, but I'll give it a try. We are in a best 2 out of 3 competitive constructed event, and the treasure map might be what I need to fix this hand. So let's make it happen. And it looks like our opponent's going to open on a red deck, and that's scary. I'll pay 2 life, and I think I will leave up the Syncopate just to cut them off of whatever the next thing is that they do. Maybe I'm supposed to play my treasure map and start scrying for land, but having these available will probably get them at some point. But already, if there were an advantage bar like they have in MTG coverage, it would be way over here for the red deck. This hand is barely functional, and now it gets even as our opponent only has a single land. Well, on that note, perhaps it's time to get scrying. Still, my opponent wouldn't keep that if they didn't have a shock or a lightning strike, and if I keep up an expansion explosion, I can get their only threat off the board. So I'm going to wait. I'm going to pass the turn, and I'm going to expect them to shoot my face, and I'm going to copy it, because I am the real pirate. I steal things. And we'll use that to shoot down their lava runner, their only threat at the moment. We're still going to take 3 on the chin, but now they are without a creature. Let's see if they can follow it up. They cannot, which is wonderful news for a struggling little Jeskai deck against a red aggro deck, but they did keep a 1-lander. I mulliganed a 2-lander, by God. I'll play the tap land and not keep the Syncopate or the expansion explosion up this time. I want to get the map rolling and get Niv-Mizzet down soon, because that's probably our path to winning the game before our opponent recovers. And it looks like they're on a pure burn deck. I'm really going to be looking for a Sovereign's Bite to copy with expansion explosion for the 3 life. Let's scry with the map. Do we want another one of these? It's not terrible. Like I just said, if they specifically have Sovereign's Bite, it's very helpful. But since I already have one, what I really want to find is a Deafening Clarion to get some lifelink on my Niv-Mizzet as soon as frickin' possible. We're almost to where we can flip map, play Niv. And our opponent has found some land. So, Syncopate this. Let's use treasure map first and see what's coming up. An opt is coming up. Let's see, so if we flip map and we have 1, 2, 3, and 1, we can play Niv-Mizzet and have opt available, which is pretty good. It's not amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but pretty good, and it starts the clock. I'll keep the opt. Now, for the sword point diplomacy, I feel like I could syncopate it, but letting it resolve, I could just give my opponent all the cards. They're a bit choked on mana, though. I think that I'll use my syncopate right now. And I could pay 1, but I like being safe because I'm kind of a coward that I'll type up my syncopate for too few mana, which has happened more times than I would like to admit. So we'll go to our main. Let's activate our treasure map and flip it. Another land is not what we require right now. Let's make some blue. Let's make some red. Let's bring out Big Daddy Cool, Niv-Mizzet themselves, and let's move. Hi, Dragon. How you doing? So now let's see how the opponent deals. Another sword point diplomacy. Well, this one gets to resolve. We draw the dive down, though, which is excellent. And let's see. Yep, those things. Take action or decline. If pay 3 life to draw. So decline is I will not pay 3 life. Decline. And decline. And decline. I'm happy to let my opponent in this situation have cards because they already have a lot of cards. They're a bit card flooded, you might say. So letting them have a whole bunch of cards doesn't really solve their Niv-Mizzet problems. And Niv-Mizzet can close. This dragon is a closer. Alright, so Expansion Explosion for 4 actually hits for 5 because of Niv's the one draw off it, and then it hits for 4 more from the draws, and then it hits for another 5. So we can definitely end this game very soon if we wished. But for now, let's hold up mana and say go. Make the opponent figure out how to do 12 damage here. Lightning Strike, what does it target? I'm going to target you, but where is this target? It's targeting Niv. Excellent. Go ahead. Yes, let's fight over Niv. This is great. And there's the Lava Coil. Trigger from Niv. We will shoot it back on your face, and I will cast a Dive Down for the ultimate in sadness, and probably the ultimate in concessions. So let's get ready for game 2. We're against a burn deck, very similar to the red aggro deck, except I don't feel I need Ixalan's Binding, because it would be unusual for a black-red burn deck to run Experimental Frenzy. So, also they have a much lower creature count, so we may not need a Seal Away either. We definitely want Lyra Dawnbringers. I definitely want the Negate. And is that all? I think that's all I need for this type of deck. So, what do we cut? I've said before I don't like playing the Ionizes against these types of decks, so I'm going to stick with that. And what else can we cut? I like keeping a Shock for the Lava Runner, some Coils for the Lava Runners. The Expansion Explosions worked out nicely. So I'm thinking one of the treasure maps or one of the Nivs. And since we brought in Lyra, which is much more high-end, and since protecting that with Dive Down has almost the same effect, I'm going to cut one of the Nivs, just because the game is probably going to speed up and we are on the draw. All right. Just making sure, just thinking a little bit more. I don't believe I need to Settle the Wreckage nor want one, so perhaps that's a good enough reason to have one Ixalan's Binding for who knows what is coming at us out of the sideboard. Teferi might also be a bit slow, but it usually draws fire, so that's usually good enough. And I'll hit done. I always try to hit done a little bit early now because, especially while talking for videos and explaining sideboard choices, on many occasions I haven't hit the done button, and it has 100% regressed to the starting deck. Alright, a Deafening Clarion is lurking, a Dive Down is lurking. This will let us play our lands untapped, and there's an opt. I will keep the hand. A little nervous that it's a bit mana heavy. Our opponent chose to draw, by the way. That is interesting. You would think that an aggressive deck would want to be on the play, but this deck seems to have an approach of trying to count to 20 through burn spells. Rather than opt, I'll play the treasure map. We'll get mapping, start mapping our destiny as soon as possible. I'll put an upkeep stop. I may want to look for something else, especially with an electrostatic field in my face. I want me a Lava Coil. So we'll bottom that land, draw something different. An Enigma Drake. Alright, well I could have had it this turn if I didn't, well no, if I hadn't scryed upkeep I never would have drawn it. So no regrets. There's nothing I can really play for 1 mana, so I don't need to opt at this moment. Let's put on the upkeep stop again, although, okay, double electrostatic field. So now what I want is I want an Expansion Explosion to copy the Deafening Clarion. Don't need you. Another land. I think I'll take the draw. I don't have that many spells, but playing the Enigma Drake and having Dive Down available seems fine. We want to have it available when Deafening Clarion for the lifelink, so if we can start filling our graveyard to get a life-linked Enigma Drake, that would be nice. But these electrostatic fields are going to cause a lot of trouble. Here's a Lava Coil, and we have the Dive Down. Any other plays? Okay, a Fanatical Firebrand that we can brick wall. And there's Niv. Happy, happy Niv Day. I think that the play for this turn is to get out our Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. And get this guy. Get this cooking.
Keep up the pace.
And keep trying to put together the combinations that we most want. No attacks, though. We can hold back the Firebrand. That's something. But we want, still looking for Expansion Explosion to go with Deafening Clarion. You can do the first Clarion, gain lifelink, attack. It depends on the Firebrand, of course, unfortunately. Our opponent with a creature heavy draw, which I don't know if they're happy about that. They're going after Teferi. I am happy about that. Please go after Teferi. And there's Lightning Strike for Teferi.
That didn't pan out.
Any attacks? No. Alright, let's use our map. Another map is not really what we're looking for. And do I want to do this before drawing? No, let's take the draw step. There's a Lava Coil. That could be very useful. Taking out the field. But it's probably best to get Niv online. Now, we don't have defense for Niv, but the opponent playing any spells to deal with it makes our whole job easier. An opt on top of the deck. So if the opponent plays anything, we draw the opt, then we can play the opt and draw another card with Niv. Just get a little more value, so I'll leave it there. And here comes the... Here it comes. Comes a big old dragon. So do we attack with our Enigma Drake? I don't think so. The opponent could still find a way around Niv, although the fact is what I'm going to do if they target Niv is kill both of their creatures. So Enigma Drake can start the attack. And you never know where that damage might be. It might be important. Sword Point Diplomacy. Here we go. Well, I'll take my draw step. And I'll definitely kill off the Pyromancer since it's a wizard and can make Wizard's Lightning cheaper. And do we want to pay 3 life against any of these? I don't think so. I don't think any of these are worth paying 3 life. And we'll see what they do with those cards. Not the scariest collection of cards I've ever seen, but here comes that Pyromancer again. Alright, so with this on the stack, but without them having another mana, I will do the opt thing and kill off the Pyromancer and the Firebrand. I don't think I need a Syncopate. From this position, no, I don't believe I do. Alright, dive down off the top. Let's put a damage on the electrostatic field, and now you're going to see the absolute disgustingness occur. Where we play this card, and we choose 3 damage and lifelink. And we use the Niv-Mizzet ability to do another damage to the other electrostatic field. Blowing all that up. Now, if I want to gain a little bit more life, I can dive down now. But that's not necessary. We're already going to gain 9. And if that doesn't put away a burn deck, I don't know what does. Alright, I will again choose to be on the play. You might ask, is there ever a situation where you want to choose to draw first? Maybe in a control mirror. That's probably, or in a mirror match where you're both trying to be the slower deck, not the faster deck. Control and mid-range mirrors are probably the best examples of that. This is a very low on land hand, but we have an early play and an early counter. I'm going to keep it. I'm very worried about just drawing the wrong half of the deck from here and losing. Anyway, we're in game 1. It is competitive constructed. And our opponent did take a mulligan and a scry. Alright, I'll get the 2 mana available to have Syncopate up as soon as possible. Our opponent's going to get Opt on. We could have copied the Opt. I don't like that play very much. I prefer to save this for something else. And our opponent has the treasure map. And we do not want to give up the mana advantage, as it appears that we may be in the mirror. Haven't seen anything that's not in our list right now. Second treasure map. Well, that's fun. Alright. So we're going to be behind in the treasure map arms race. That's not good. But I will take land. I will not turn land down at this stage. Usually first Niv is winning Niv. I'll play this one tapped because I don't have things to do with other lands. Alright, they play their land untapped and pass. Well, we're going to have the mana to play Niv on time. Will our opponent have it? We are on the play, and we've managed to hit our land drops. It's too bad I don't know if I can get to dive down Niv, but since I have 2 Nivs, I think my best play is just to get it out there. Alright, blue, 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 red, 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 yep. Let the dragon face-off begin. Treasure map flip. So opponent has the mana advantage. Now they have the Niv. Now they have their own Niv. But I get first trick. Alright. I can try to kill their Niv, but there is that dive down potential. I could also just try to race them, because I could potentially resolve a big expansion explosion this turn. If I expansion for 3, I mean, maybe that's just what I go for. I go for expansion explosion and see if the opponent dive downs their Niv, but then I still draw a bunch of cards and do a bunch of damage. That seems pretty good. If they counter it, that's really sad. Ugh. Maybe I'm just supposed to go face, since dive down can't protect that. But what do you want to play around, the counter or the dive down? Well, let's go right to Niv's face. Now I could also I could just attack and see if the opponent would trade. Let's see what the opponent does if I throw an attack at them. Damage? Okay. Maybe they have another Niv as well. Alright. They wish to draw cards. They have Teferi. Alright. Minus target Niv.
Let's slow this down.
Yes. So in response to that, let's shock the face and use the Niv trigger to kill the Teferi.
Don't make another move. I'm not ready for this quite yet.
And now we should be able to untap and throw an expansion at the opponent. And find out if they have a counter, a spell pierce, something like that. Would we have seen it anywhere? I don't think we would have seen it anywhere, so they very likely could have it, but I think with them tapped low, we should go for it. Okay, they have a Syncopate. That's too bad, but it happens. Enigma Drake. Alright. Well, now I'm down to land. Although Niv returns next turn. Let's see about a Settle. Again, if we can draw out counter spells and things like that on these spells, that's okay. Ionize. Okay, fine by me. It's not a big deal, I don't feel. Our opponent has all spells in hand. We need to watch out for settles ourselves. I'm not blocking. They might have their own expansion explosions as well. Dive down something to keep in mind. Okay, here we go. Rekindling Phoenix, huh? Well, I don't think it's likely I can kill the Drake this turn. So, let's fire at face. And then even as Niv dies, the card advantage that Niv gets drawing us things might get us back in the game. You see the Rekindling Phoenix, and now with 2 Lava Coils spent, the opponent might be in trouble, but the flood is wild. Hopefully those 2 Lava Coils make room for this Rekindling Phoenix to do work. And hopefully there isn't another Teferi. Clarion. Okay. It appears that all the removal spells are available for the Drake. Alright, well, we got the Phoenix back. And we draw Ionize, so staying alive. Although very much on the edge. Dive down, perhaps? Let's see if we can stop that from happening. Okay, I think we got rid of the Drake. Thank you, Rekindling Phoenix. Ooh, interesting. I've got my own Drake now, although a very tiny Drake because of the flood that we've incurred. I'm pretty nervous about the one of Settle the Wreckage in the deck, but it is a one of, after all. And I don't know what this Clarion's going to do otherwise. I'm going to try giving my creature a lifelink. Nice. That gets us out of the range of just dying here. Ugh. Then our opponent draws Teferi.
You can show what you need to slow down.
What can we draw? One of the worst draws possible.
Hurry!
Yep, that's enough for me. Alright, looking at the sideboard here. Banefires, yep. Spell Swindle, Negate, Disdainful Stroke, Ixalan's Binding. Cleansing Nova to blow up opponent's bindings. Don't think I need to Settle the Wreckages. Lava Coil, I like to take out my Enigma Drake for this matchup for the most part. So maybe we're supposed to. Let's see here. The one of Shock is probably extremely unnecessary. I don't think Settle the Wreckage is really where you need to be. I think I want to be all about those threats. So, yeah, cheap removals like Lava Coil and such I don't think is where I need to be at. Also, Rekindling Phoenix I would expect to be exiled because there's so much exile removal after sideboards. I could keep the Seal-Aways and just hope to hit the Nivs with the Seal-Aways. However, they're usually pretty good at playing around that stuff. And being on the play should prevent that for the most part. Okay. Protect me a little bit. I should be the aggressor if we get a decent hand. Alright, let's give this a try. We're going to need to get a bit lucky to win the Niv battles 2 games in a row. I still think it's important to be on the play so that you can Niv first. And at this point I need blue mana. That's my chief concern, is that I'm going to draw way more red than blue and not be able to cast Niv. Also, turn 2 treasure map. Really need that in my life. 2 straight games without it in the mirror is pretty nasty. Yep, need blue mana. Like I said, my big scare right now is that I won't draw enough of it, and there you go. Alright, so second island. We could play the Enigma Drake, but we couldn't protect it, so let's pass the turn and try it on our next turn. Our person's also an opt machine. Alright, let's try the opt. Disdainful Stroke is probably a good one to have handy. But not yet. I don't need to be in a rush to cast it. Resolves. Nice. We'll see if we can pressure our opponent with this, plus dive downs. Although I don't want to stall on land now. Ixalan's Binding is fine. Up to 3. Okay, we got a treasure map. Although stalling on mana, very unideal. But we can start clocking at least, and try to set up Banefires. Teferi, Disdainful Stroke. Let's put a mark here.
Now.
That didn't work. Oh, the opponent's going to scoop to that. Okay. I guess they're in a hurry. I didn't think we were that far ahead. Alright, so what did we see? Not too much. We saw that our opponent is bringing in Ixalan's Binding, which probably confirms that Rekindling Phoenix should stay out. Although it is only a 1-of. On the draw, do I want more threats? I think I want more answers on the draw. Although that Enigma Drake with some dive down tempo was pretty solid. Yeah, on the draw I want to focus on getting to big mana. Are there any changes we need to make? Like, none of this really helps. The only argument you can make is if I have a Lava Coil available, I might be able to take out an early Drake, but if they use the dive down strategy as well, that just doesn't work, so I think we stick with what we've got. And hope to get a little lucky. Maybe a turn 2 treasure map, if the deck is willing. Hey! Keep. Although I am a bit nervous. The 2 land starts, I think every game I've had has had 2 land, at least in the first hand. This makes me nervous. Draw. Did I mark my upkeep by accident? Now? Or maybe that's delayed from the time I tried to mark it a game ago. It's too bad I could not have had a blue mana open for the Spell Pierce for my opponent's treasure map, but alas, there you go. And there is a binding, which is wonderful. It helps us compete in the Niv mirror. And now we want to make sure we draw a lot of land. Because we have all the pieces we need, we only need land to make it happen. Perfect. I should have opted first. This is kind of a waste of that free scry. Oh well. Move on with life. We'll remember next time, won't we? So I could go for the binding on the map, but I don't think that's the play. Don't think that's the play. At this stage, our opponent will get their map flipped, and they might be able to Niv, but then we can also flip our map. Ooh, are they missing a land? Ooh. Oh, yes, please. Here's my opt. There's a second map, which I don't think I need. A land, which I do. There's Teferi. That's a good card to have. Now, how many lands can I have here? Okay, another land off the top. It's not terrible. Yeah, because we have all the pieces we need. We just need the mana to do it. So do we go for this now? I think with a Spell Pierce available, we do. Here we go. Now the opponent might be able to use a binding Spell Pierce thing, but then we can binding the binding. So everything's pretty rosy at the moment. Teferi. We cannot counter that from this spot. And we also can't put this on the stack. What is the right play? If we Spell Pierce Teferi and the opponent pays 2, and then they minus, what does that do? Well, this goes back in the deck. Then we can Ixalan's Binding Teferi if we wish, or we could save it for Niv, which I think is more important. Yeah. Also give up some treasures, I suppose.
I am not going to sit this one. Not so fast.
So, we can do Teferi minus on Teferi. But another thing to keep in mind is that there is 2 mana up. There could still be a negate. So I think that leads me to binding the Teferi and also having Ionize available. Ionize to binding the binding, although our opponent could have another counter. And here comes their own Niv, which is something I was concerned about. So, let's see what the opponent still has up their sleeve. Alright, all their treasures are gone. Ooh.
I won't hide from the world
If I
any longer.
hit the combat button, my opponent loses this mana. But they're going to do something with it, right? What color did they make? I can't see it. I think it was red. All right. Oh, green. Well, that was a giveaway as well, and a mistake, as it didn't do anything. I don't know what just happened there. I think my opponent suffered a bit of the misclicks, and they would also have to not know the takebacks. All right, they go for an... I can counter this because it's only for one, so I will try to at least. I won't be surprised when my opponent has another counter of some kind, and it is a Spell Pierce.
Time for plan B.
Oh yeah, plan B, always plan B. All right, do I have a blue open? Yes, I do. We can't tap the treasure map to play Niv because of that crazy mana cost, of course. Here is Rekindling Phoenix. Do I want to syncopate that just for the card? No, I don't, but the opponent is going to scoop it up. Apparently impatient with my pace or frustrated with the game, but if you're a control mage, I think you've got to get a little bit patient. If you sign up for a control mirror, you play a control deck and you play a control mirror, this is my personal opinion. Everybody can leave if they want to. That's totally up to them. But come on. There's a lot of thinking that goes into a control mirror. Man, we're getting all the choices today. I will play first. You know what it's probably doing? Both players probably get the choice. And if they line up differently, it just gives you what you want. And if they line up the same, they pick at random. That's what I'm guessing. That seems like it would be nice. People get what they want more often. Because if my opponent said draw and I said play, there's no debate. I like the hand. Turn 2 treasure map. Enigma Drake that may or may not come out. Deafening Clarion to protect me. Not a lot to complain about here. In this case, I want to see my options, so I'll take my draw step before doing the scribe. There's nothing I'm desperately looking for. Our opponent has a search for his Kanta on turn 2. That can be really good in the mirror if, and I do mean if, we don't kill them fast enough. Remember, we're going to have the Nivs, so often we can let them look at their cards all they want to. So this time I'm deciding not to play an unprotected Enigma Drake that will most likely just die, and instead get my map going so that the sooner I find Niv, the better. Or the sooner I can play a big explosion, the better. Also marking the upkeep to keep the map thing going rather than worry about being the first creature on the battlefield since we're not in a race. Well, at least not a race in terms of creatures. Race in terms of cards and mana and finding one of my 4 copies of Niv-Mizzet. All right, Marwag's having a turn. And another expansion explosion, I will not turn that away. Can be very good in the mirrors when counter spells are flying back and forth. I'm going to continue to not worry about Enigma Drake. For one thing, when you place spells into your opponent's search for Iskanta and they have counter magic open, you're just helping them flip the Iskanta sooner. On many cases, a Sinister Sabotage, for example, might put 2 cards in the graveyard. Alright, Dragonskull Summit. Our opponent must have plenty of land, which means they're probably sitting on at least 1 more, maybe 2 more than that, which is about 4 spells. You gotta assume some removal. Alright, that's obnoxious. What are we discarding? Deafening Clarion can go. I'm going to scry and at least have a look at what's on top. Spell Pierce, are you useful? Well, we can play Rekindling Phoenix and protect it with the Spell Pierce, so perhaps it will be useful. I don't know if that's good enough protection, to be honest. Let's discard Deafening Clarion. There's the Spell Pierce draw. So let's use blue and flip over our map. Another land off the top is good. We still need a lot more lands. Let's make a red and deploy the Phoenix. Now the opponent may also have, like, if they go for Vraska's Contempt, we could also copy it and hit their Bolas with it, which could be fun. So 2 choices there. I think I'd side with Spell Pierce first. Unexplained Disappearance. Weird. Sure. Copying it doesn't do too much. Spell Piercing it does literal nothing. And we'll play it again. It's only 4 damage. And plus, this time I don't have to sacrifice treasures, so our mana advantage continues to grow. Let's go red. Let's go red. Let's go blue. And yeah, let's go colorless so we have expansion open as well. Well, that wasn't a counter, which is what I was kind of expecting, was a counter spell right there. So perhaps the hand is, what would it be? Probably not a Vraska's Contempt. Unexplained Disappearance, perhaps a Price of Fame, that type of effect, Cast Down. Could be those types of things. There might be another Bolas, which you never want to play when they're all legendary and stuff. Blink of an eye with Kicker. Well, I could copy it and Link Search for his Kanta? That doesn't seem great. Linking Nicole Bolas doesn't seem great. I don't wish to discard again. I'll Spell Pierce this. And with this mana up, yeah. So now, let's see. Our opponent could have their own Spell Pierce. I don't see anything like that. They could have a Dive Down, which would be shocking. If I attack first, perhaps I'd see the Dive Down. Still, I'd rather be defensive. All right. Let's see what happens. Because if this resolves, it's so good, it's worth trying. It's worth going for it. Excellent. Now our opponent is in flip territory for his Kanta, which is scary, but it is a very mana-intensive card. They don't have that many lands. We have a pretty big mana advantage. There's other Bolas. We could hit for another 4 with Expansion Explosion and keep on going. Does it really bother me that much? What if we played Enigma Drake and just started clocking our opponent, counter racing? We could leave up 3 mana that way and still have access to Expansion, Opt, and Syncopate. Seems pretty good. Pretty good to me. All right, let's start off with an attack. Our opponent's still I mean, I guess they could potentially flip the Ravager next turn. They're going to block. I'm stunned. All right. Well, no more Ravager flipping threats. Let's deploy the map. Opponent might have a fungal infection. Or not. Thought Erasure goes to the graveyard. So they don't want to play that? Yeah, they had all the cards. They had 8 in the graveyard, I believe. It's blocking the number. Still some UI stuff. Yeah, 8. So maybe they already have an erasure. Or maybe they needed the mana for something bigger. Ritual of Soot. Well, Syncopate won't work. Expansion won't work. I could try to draw what? Did I have a negate in the main? I don't believe so. So, Dive Down I could draw. Clarion, not so great. Settle, also not so great. All right. Let's mark the upkeep for the stop. Let's try to find Niv. It's about time we Niv'd. Teferi's fine. You'll do. It's funny how we're looking for something other than Teferi now in these decks. What have you got over there? Disdainful Stroke, perhaps? Nope.
Sorry I'm late. We need to move quickly.
Their hand has been quite the mystery to me so far. I mean, where you didn't want a Thought Erasure, where you threw away your Bolus to set up that Ritual of Soot, I suppose. Eldritch Reborn. Well, that can't be allowed to happen. They can pay 1, so we make it for 2. Important to keep that 2 in case of a Spell Pierce in that specific instance. And not overpay or underpay. Yep, keep those lands going to the bottom. Alright, let's go, Teferi.
Hold that thought.
Find me things. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is fire this off and draw just a bunch of cards. While it's unlikely my opponent can do anything. If they had a Spell Pierce, we would have seen it. So they don't have that. So let's resolve this trigger, untap these, and now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's all the mana, so it doesn't matter what we tap the treasures for. And yeah, I would like a new starting hand plus 3. That's enough to draw the concession. When your opponent says I'll draw 10 now and you have no pressure on the board, it's not good. Alright, so Grixis control wasn't covered in my sideboard plan, but I think we can treat it for the most part like a control mirror. Bring in Banefire, bring in Spell Swindle, Negate, Disdainful Stroke, Ixalan's Binding. Those things seem good. I don't believe I need the Nova. Using it to blow up like a Search for Azcanta doesn't feel right. The Shock can go. The Lava Coils can stay because of Bolus, I think. Clarions can certainly go. Settle, I don't feel I need. So maybe there's a few more cuts we have to think about. Usually it would be the Lava Coils, but Bolus kind of says a cheap, easy answer to you would be nice. We could cut our own Enigma Drakes to avoid Ritual of Soot, which our opponent appeared to leave in. And Dive Down doesn't protect against that. That sounds fine with me. I would expect them to also have Lava Coils and other spot removals to make Enigma Drake not as strong. Plus with Banefire we have a lot of finishers anyway. Alright, rock and roll. Okay, counter, 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 land, 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 land. Why not? It doesn't have some of the pieces that I consider pretty key for the deck in the matchup, like Treasure Map and Niv, but we'll make it work. I'm going to pay 2 life, have Spell Pierce available right away. It telegraphs it. The opponent might think it's an opt though, and I definitely want to cut Azcanta off. I want to cut that off too. Interesting that our opponent still went for it in the face of the steam vents coming in untapped. Bloodfast can be so good in the control mirrors, or at least it was last format. It's unclear if it still is, but at least last format you would keep a hand with 2 lands in Bloodfast in any control mirror no matter what. So it might be the whole reason they have this hand. Well, we don't want to slam a Phoenix. Do I take my counter shields down to play a map? I don't think so. I'm not too worried. I can wait a little longer. If I draw 1 more land, that's easy mode. All right, let's see if we can opt to that land. We can, but we don't need to play it untapped just yet. And then next turn we have map, and just leaving Ionize open as long as possible. Getting our opponent to make a move. They just missed a land drop. Well, they pay 2 life on that. They pay 2 life, but they don't use it. Well, I'll pay 2 life here because I want to be able to play treasure map and use it and counter something. Leaving all the blue mana available. Our opponent with their counter magic. Let's see if they decide to use it. They do. We could fight over this map, but I actually don't think it's that big of a deal. It's much better earlier than late. And plus this may embolden my opponent into playing something else. I still don't want to play this without the dive down available. Thought Erasure. Let's say no. To the best of our ability. If they double counter, then they'll have to pick Ionize, Rekindling Phoenix, or Teferi. Alright, they're going to Syncopate, so they're tapped out. So now they're priced in, I think, to picking Teferi. If they don't, they're probably just going to lose, but I still get Rekindling Phoenix protected by Ionize and Dive Down, which they've got to figure out how to beat that. Not protected by Ionize just yet. Perhaps the next turn. Let's make sure that we have all the blue mana available to opt and dive down. Vraska's Contempt. Here is my dive down. This is what it does. They knew about that. And yet they went for it anyway. So they must have multiples. Ooh. So, ooh. Let's wait until we can protect you with dive down. Duress. Ionize. Well, if the opponent gets to duress us, they either take the dive down or the Ionize. If we Ionize it, they don't know about this. Because they knew about the last one. They don't know about this one. Alright. They know about this Ionize, though. Okay, they go for Contempt in response. We'll go for Dive Down in response. And there's another island for the Niv. Do I play it? The opponent uses Thought Erasure and Duress. So far we've seen 2 Vraska's Contempts. Yeah, I think we get this onto the battlefield. I don't think they can kill both that easily. And they're under a ton of pressure as it is. Ooh. Well, what does that actually do?
You're just fuel for the fires of freedom.
What does that actually do at all? I don't think that does anything here. I mean, you can steal it. If you have a one drop, I guess you get to draw a card. But it doesn't get sacrificed. And yes, that will in fact be the game. Well, thank you for watching. I hope that you really enjoyed this dive into Adrian Sullivan's Grand Prix Milwaukee winning Jeskai deck. A very different way to attack the meta, just spamming that Niv, protecting that Niv. And I hope you'll give it a try if you have the wild cards and have the time. Do go knock yourself out. It's a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I will see you in the next video.